Part 1. On the edge of a forgotten village, where the asphalt slowly crumbled into dust and weeds pushed through every crack, lived an old woman everyone called simply Baba Nina. Her house leaned slightly to one side, as if it were tired of resisting time. The wooden porch creaked with every step, the roof groaned in strong wind, and the faded blue paint had long surrendered to sun and rain. Yet the windows were always clean, and a small lace curtain hung neatly inside, proof that someone still cared. Baba Nina had learned to live with very little. Her pension barely covered bread, salt, and tea. Once a week she allowed herself a bit of sugar, carefully counting each spoon. Behind the house was a modest garden, potatoes, cabbage, onions, and a few stubborn apple trees that bore fruit only when they felt generous. 3 hens wandered freely, their eggs often the difference between hunger and survival. Her life had not always been this quiet. There was a time when laughter filled the house, when a man's boots stood by the door and a child's schoolbag hung from a hook on the wall. Her husband died suddenly, collapsing one morning before he could even finish his tea. Her son left soon after, first to the city, then farther away. At first he wrote letters, then called, then nothing. Baba Nina never blamed him. Life was heavy, and everyone carried it differently. Loneliness settled into her bones like cold. That autumn arrived early. The air smelled of damp leaves and smoke from distant chimneys. Baba Nina was returning from the village shop, her thin arms aching from the weight of a small bag of groceries, when she noticed movement near the road by her gate. 3 children. They stood close together, as if afraid to be separated even by a step. Their clothes were too thin for the weather, patched and dirty. Their hair was unkempt, their shoes worn down to the soles. But it was their faces that stopped her breath. 3 identical faces, pale and tense, eyes too serious for such young boys. They didn't run when they saw her. They didn't ask for money. They just watched her, silently, waiting. Baba Nina felt something tighten in her chest. "Are you lost?" she asked, setting the bag down. The boys exchanged quick glances. One of them shook his head. Another looked at the ground. The third, clearly the bravest, lifted his eyes. "Hungry," he said quietly. That single word broke something inside her. She looked into her bag. Half a loaf of black bread. A small piece of lard. Some potatoes. Enough for one old woman for 2 days, if she was careful. She picked up the bag again and nodded. "Come, it's cold." Inside, the house smelled of dried herbs and old wood. Baba Nina set the boys on the bench by the wall and lit the stove. She poured water into her only pot, added cabbage and potatoes, and cut the bread into equal slices. 3 larger ones, and 1 small piece she quietly set aside for herself. As the soup simmered, she studied them. They moved carefully, as if any sudden action might get them thrown out. When she placed the bowls in front of them, they hesitated. "It's for you," she said firmly. They ate fast at first, then slower, clearly trying not to appear desperate. One boy licked the edge of his spoon, embarrassed. Another pushed his bowl back toward her when he thought she wasn't looking. "You eat," she told them. "I already did." It was a lie, but a gentle one. When they finished, she poured them tea, weak, without sugar. Still, they held the cups with both hands, savoring the warmth. "What are your names?" she asked. "Misha," said the first. "Kolya," said the second. "Pasha," whispered the third. "And where are your parents?" Silence fell like a stone. The boys looked at each other. Misha swallowed. "Mama, gone. Papa, gone." "How long have you been alone?" Pasha raised 3 fingers. 3 weeks. Maybe more. 3 weeks. Baba Nina felt dizzy. That night, she gave them her bed and slept in an old chair near the stove, waking often to listen to their breathing. Every time one of them stirred, she opened her eyes, afraid they might disappear by morning like a dream. But they didn't. In the morning, she washed their faces with warm water, patched their clothes as best she could, and fed them the last of her bread. Then she wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders and took their hands. "We're going to town," she said. "You can't stay like this." The social services office smelled of dust and indifference. The woman behind the desk barely looked up as Baba Nina explained, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "They're homeless. They're children. They're alone." The woman sighed. "We're full. They're triplets," Baba Nina said sharply. "And you will not separate them." That finally got attention. Hours passed. Papers were shuffled. Questions were asked. The boys sat quietly, holding onto each other's sleeves. At one point, Kolya leaned against Baba Nina's leg and fell asleep. By evening, arrangements were made. A temporary shelter in the city. A bus would take them. When it was time to leave, Pasha started crying. "You'll forget us," he said. Baba Nina knelt in front of him despite the pain in her knees. "Never," she promised. "I know your faces. I know your names. As long as I live, I'll remember." She visited whenever she could. Sometimes she walked part of the way to save money. She brought apples, knitted socks from old yarn, and told them stories from her youth, about love, about hardship, about surviving winters when there was almost nothing to eat. The boys waited for her visits like holidays. Then one day, in the middle of winter, the shelter director called her in. "They've been adopted," the woman said. Baba Nina's heart stopped. Together. Yes. A foreign family insisted on taking all three. Relief and pain collided inside her. "Can I see them?" "They left this morning." Baba Nina walked home through falling snow, each step heavier than the last. She sat alone in her quiet house that night, holding 3 small knitted scarves she never got to give them. Years passed. Her back bent lower. Her hands shook more. The village grew emptier, quieter. But every spring, she planted 3 extra rows of potatoes. "For my boys," she whispered to the earth. Part 2. The summer the engines came roaring into the village began like any other. Baba Nina woke before sunrise, as she always did. Her bones protested as she sat up in bed, and for a long moment she simply listened, to the distant crow of a rooster, to the wind brushing against the side of her old house, to the familiar silence that had become her companion. The years had folded themselves gently over her, but they had not made her bitter. She had learned to speak to her garden, to thank the hens for their eggs, to greet the morning as if it were an old friend. That day, she was tying a faded scarf around her silver hair when she heard it. A low, unfamiliar rumble. At first she thought it was thunder, though the sky was clear and blue. Then the sound grew louder, deeper, like 3 storms approaching at once. The hens scattered. Dogs in the distance began barking. Baba Nina stepped carefully onto her porch and squinted down the dusty road. What she saw made her grip the railing. 3 sleek, black Lamborghini cars turned the corner, their polished surfaces reflecting the sun like mirrors. The village had never seen such machines. They looked unreal, like something from television, smooth, sharp, powerful. The engines purred with restrained strength as they rolled slowly past crooked fences and sagging roofs. Curtains twitched, doors opened, neighbors gathered, whispering, "Who could that be? They must be lost. They're not from here." The cars stopped directly in front of Baba Nina's gate. For a moment, the engines idled. Then, one by one, the doors lifted upward like wings. 3 men stepped out. They were tall, confident, dressed in tailored suits that probably cost more than the entire village's monthly income. But despite their polished appearance, there was something restless in the way they looked around, like boys searching for a memory. Baba Nina felt her heart pound in her chest. The first man removed his sunglasses. His eyes scanned her porch, her garden, the apple trees. The second one swallowed, visibly emotional. The third took a small step forward. And then she saw it. The eyes, older, stronger, but unmistakable. Her hand flew to her mouth. They walked toward her slowly, as if afraid that moving too fast might shatter the moment. "Baba Nina," the tallest one asked, his voice deep but trembling. Her knees nearly gave out. "Misha," she whispered. The man's breath hitched. "Yes, Kolia," she said, turning to the second. He nodded, unable to speak. "And, Pasha," the youngest stepped forward, tears already forming. "We found you." The world seemed to disappear. The village, the cars, the whispers, everything faded. There were only 3 men and 1 old woman on a crooked porch. They reached her at the same time. Carefully, gently, they wrapped their arms around her fragile frame, afraid to hurt her. But she held them tightly, with surprising strength, as if anchoring herself in reality. "You grew," she murmured, laughing through tears. "You grew so tall, and you're still scolding with your eyes," Kolia said softly, smiling. Neighbors watched in stunned silence as the powerful strangers stood crying like children in front of the poorest house in the village. Inside the house, nothing had changed much. The same wooden table, the same stove, the same lace curtain. The 3 men ducked slightly as they entered, suddenly looking too large for the tiny space. Misha ran his hand along the wall. "It smells the same. Soup and apples," Pasha added, smiling. Baba Nina busied herself out of habit. "Sit, I'll make tea." "No," Kolia said gently, guiding her to the chair instead. "Today, you sit." They told her everything. After being adopted, they had moved to another country. Their adoptive parents were strict but fair, determined to give them education and discipline. The boys learned quickly, perhaps because they had known what it meant to have nothing. They studied late into the night. They worked small jobs as teenagers. They saved every coin. But we made a promise, Misha said. Remember? Baba Nina frowned playfully. I am old. Remind me. That we would never be separated, Pasha answered. And that one day, Kolya continued, we would return for you. They had built a technology company from scratch, 3 brothers with one vision. What began in a small rented garage with outdated computers slowly grew. Their software solutions attracted attention. Investors came. Partnerships formed. They worked harder than anyone else, driven by something deeper than ambition. Every time we felt tired, Misha said quietly, we remembered that you gave us your bread when you had almost none. Pasha added, you fought strangers for us. And you planted potatoes for 3 boys who were no longer there, Kolya said, his voice breaking. We found out from the old shelter records. The director remembered you. Baba Nina blinked, surprised. I only did what anyone would do. They exchanged knowing looks. No, Misha said, firmly, not anyone. Silence filled the room, but it was warm, full, not empty like before. After a while, Misha cleared his throat. We came with a plan. Baba Nina narrowed her eyes suspiciously. That sounds dangerous. They laughed. We want to take care of you, Pasha said gently. Properly. A house in the city. Doctors. Comfort. No more worrying about winter. She looked around her small kitchen. At the stove her husband had installed. At the worn table where 3 little boys once ate cabbage soup. This is my home, she said softly. They expected that answer. Kolya nodded. Then we won't move you. Instead, over the next months, something extraordinary happened. The old house was carefully restored, not replaced. Specialists reinforced the foundation but kept the wooden beams. The roof was rebuilt but shaped exactly the same. Insulation was added, plumbing modernized, electricity made safe. The garden expanded. New soil was brought in. A greenhouse appeared behind the house. The hens were upgraded to a proper co-op that looked like a miniature cottage. The village watched in disbelief as workers came and went, but always under the careful supervision of 3 sharply dressed men who refused to let the house lose its soul. Baba Nina protested at first. This is too much. It's not enough, Misha replied. They arranged regular medical visits. A kind nurse from the nearby town began stopping by weekly. Groceries appeared without Baba Nina having to count coins. But the most important change was not material. The house was no longer silent. Every few weeks, the roar of engines would echo again, not to show wealth, but because those cars were simply what the brothers drove. They would arrive with laughter, with stories, with energy that filled every corner. They sat at the old table, now restored but still the same, and ate soup together. They argued about business. They teased each other. They helped in the garden, despite clearly having no idea how to plant potatoes properly. Too deep, Baba Nina scolded, smacking Misha's hand lightly. Yes, Commander, he laughed. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the fields, Baba Nina sat on her porch watching the 3 men talk animatedly near the gate. Their silhouettes were strong against the golden sky. You know, she said quietly when they returned to sit beside her, I used to pray not for wealth, not for comfort, only that you would stay together. Kolya took her hand. We did. And you came back, she added, her voice trembling. Because you waited, Pasha replied. She smiled, her eyes shining. The village would forever remember the day 3 Lamborghini cars arrived in front of the poorest house on the street. But what mattered most was not the engines or the suits or the success. It was that one small act of kindness, a bowl of soup divided into 3 equal parts, had grown into something no one could measure. And in that once quiet house, an old woman never again ate alone.